Thank you all so much for being here. Before we begin, can we all give a huge round of applause to Team BLF first, because we're back in a fully physical avatar after 2 years. And it's great to see so many readers and the publishing industry and authors back with a bang in person. And of course, 2 years later, Shobhaa is back in Bangalore as well. Can we have a huge round of applause to welcome her? Welcome to Bangalore, Shobhaa. This really is the best day of my life, I think, because I started off at BLF as a volunteer, and that's where I first met Shobhaa over some dinner and wine. I mean, I was underage then, so I was not having the wine. Uh, Others were, but I had some amazing food, and that sort of kicked off years of friendship, relationship, mentorship. I mean, this is the mentor, I'm the mentee, obviously. And years later, now we're on the same stage, and I'm so glad and thrilled to be introducing Shobhaa and Shobhaa's new book, which will be out early next year. It's called Insatiable, and I couldn't think of a more apt, perfect title for a memoir by Shobhaa, because if there is anybody who is incredible, amazing, illuminating, iconic, it is Shobhaa. So one more round of applause to Shobhaa, and then we'll just get right into it. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here in such large numbers.
I'd just like to say a quick thank you as well. Great, great, great to be back after 2 years. Nama Bengaluru, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm so sleep deprived. I've just gotten off a flight and literally rolled into this most wonderful festival. I see the crowds and I am gasping. I mean, JLF, you're on notice. Fabulous crowds, fabulous and very engaging readers. We met them on the way up to the room and down as we came to meet all of you here. And Surya, of course, I have to tell you, I mean, he's pretending to be all goody-goody, but the first time we met, yes, he was underage, and we were having a rather adult conversation, quite forgetting that there was young Surya sitting there, ears flapping and taking it all in. And I turned to my co-author and I said, there is an underage person here. I don't know whether our language is a little too rough and whether we should be talking as freely as we are. And he assured me with the wisdom of an 80-year-old that he's heard this much and much more during his young years. And we became friends almost instantly and have remained friends. I'm so proud to see Surya, the way he has grown, evolved, such a bright and beautiful and wonderful young person, someone that India can be proud of. I know that there are great things ahead for him. So it's a privilege and an honor to be here for me and to be interviewed or be in conversation with Surya. Thank you, Surya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shobhaa. That's amazing words. Thank you so much. That really means a lot. So I'll just get right into it. So Insatiable, Shobhaa, is about, it's not a recipe book. It is about food, though. And it is about Shobhaa's experiences with food and how it has brought together friends, family, experiences, memories of a lifetime. My first question, Shobhaa, is what about food is so joyful or so celebratory that you picked this as your subject? Because over all these years, I'm sure you have passion for film, dance, art, music, but there's obviously something about a food-based memoir that drew you to writing this book. So if you could just tell us a little bit about the book and food.
Well, the title of the book is Insatiable, My Hunger for Life. It's a memoir to mark my 75th year, which would be next month. So it is a milestone birthday, so I couldn't let it go without chronicling what it feels like to be at this age and this stage in my life. And at each significant birthday, when I turned 50, I did a book. When I turned 60, I did a book. When I turned 70, I did a book, and 75 now. I don't know whether I'm going to be around till 80, but who knows. But this book was important as a very joyful memoir, which is not giving gyan about, how I've lived my life and any of that. It's not pompous, it's not pretentious, it's not pedantic. It's just a delight in sharing what life has meant to me. And amazingly enough, when I was looking for something to keep it all together, some sort of a cohesiveness to a memoir, what came up over and over again was food. And why food? Because food is really an emotion. Food is home. Food is love. Shared food has led to many wonderful friendships for me, including with strangers. And I'd like to narrate a small incident. When I was flying over to Bengaluru this morning, a person next to me introduced himself, and we were busy tucking into hot idlis and uttapam, which Vistara is kind enough to serve instead of, just almonds and cashews and instant upma. And of course, we were looking at each other's plates and the trays and looking at what, it always happens, you look at what the other person is eating. Always. And a conversation starts from there. And talking to this young man, I discovered so many things that he's proud to be from this city, but travels the world as a high-powered techie working with an American bank. His wife is with the Reserve Bank of India and has been promoted, so she lives in Mumbai. But beyond all of this, what we just ended up talking about is, of course, food. I mean, I got to understand his life, which is very demanding. He lives on a plane, I understand that. But he really lamented going to Argentina, and that's been on my bucket list for as long as I can remember. I wanted to go to Argentina and go and learn how to dance the tango in that square with a ponytailed stranger who will sort of sweep me off my feet. And oh, it was just one of those distant dreams and I said, this person is complaining about going to Argentina. I asked him, what is there to complain about? He said, I exist on an apple and sometimes a pastry and some bread because they've never heard of vegetarian food. So each time I'm going to Argentina, I starve. And I wondered why his wonderful wife didn't pack some good tiffin for him to go on his trips to Argentina. But I know that food connects in extraordinary ways, like this conversation. It started with food. I hope it doesn't end with food. And some of my most enduring relationships have actually been deeply invested in food. So it's a memoir which tracks just this 1 year of my life. That's from 2021 Jan to coming up 2023. By the time the book is in production. It's 1 year remembered through food shared with my friends, with my children, with my grandchildren, with strangers, in different situations. And underneath it all, underneath the food and my complete immersive experience when I'm eating, is also what food teaches us about ourselves and about one another, and, well, primarily what it teaches us about relationships. I notice everything, as we all do. Do people share? The people who do not share food, I instinctively do not trust. I mean, you see someone looking at something you're eating, I always offer it and say, would you like to try some? But there are some people who actually hide their food. So, as if, we're going to grab it and deprive them. Also, food is something so basic, Surya. It's so primal that for a lot of women in particular, and this again was a lesson I learned many years ago from a female and a very dear and close friend from the city, who, confronted with a difficult phase in her life, quite a tough phase where her life could go this way or that, actually asked me, she said, if I take the second decision, khana kidhar se milega? No, it was a real fear. It's not that it was a fear that she may starve. It wasn't so much, it wasn't spelt out as, will I have enough money to survive? It was much more basic and much more therefore real and poignant and touching when she said, I'm afraid, where will I get my next meal from? And a lot of women, believe you me, I've been through it. I know what hunger means. I know what deprivation means. I know what that fear is. It's very real. And a lot of the times we make wrong choices, emotional choices, maybe marriage, maybe courtship, maybe so many other things because we're afraid of starving. It's something so human, but we don't acknowledge it sufficiently. So food plays a very important role in all our lives, but maybe we don't define that to ourselves even. And we look at food a bit too casually, or sometimes we take it too much for granted. But it is one of life's greatest pleasures, and to me, it is this book is an ode to life, to food, to love, and to joy.
Thank you. One of the sort of pleasures of life that you enjoy is obviously food, the other is writing. And 50 years of writing columns, books, novels, nonfiction, tweets, Instagram captions, all of it. You name the mode, you name the use case, and Shobhaa has written it. What about a memoir specifically excites you? Do you enjoy writing a memoir? What's your process like? You said that, for example, Insatiable is a year of your experiences. So do you, for instance, have a diary where you keep your experiences so that you can do a memoir? Or is it just from memory to memoir?
It's actually quite surprising that I do journal, and I have been maintaining a diary since the age of 13 or 14. And, but none of the material is from the diary. It's very organic. I was literally writing it in the moment because I feel sometimes when you overthink something, it loses its essence and you become very self-conscious and you start thinking about construction or even how it's going to be perceived, how people are going to react to it. Whereas for me, the best kind of writing, it comes from the heart. It's straightforward, it's honest, it's spontaneous, it's not manipulative, and the book is written in exactly that spirit. So I was very thankful to my editors because they didn't try and suggest another way or another path to tell my story of this 1 year, because for all of us, not just for myself, for the entire world, it's been a very tough year coming out of the pandemic. And nothing but nothing had prepared us for it. Nothing had prepared the world for something so cataclysmic that took away the realities as we had known them. Uh, Realities were taken so much for granted, relationships were taken for granted, the everyday rhythm of our lives that we had taken for granted was suddenly gone. And that silence, which was so eerie, I mean, I used to long for the morning just to hear the sparrows on the tree outside chirping, because that would tell me that I'm still alive. So it was a sense of panic did grip most of us. We coped in different ways, and just the fact that we're all here today alive and enjoying one another's company, getting energy from words and just the people and interactions is enough to be really, truly grateful, because our very next breath is something that we realized during the pandemic that you can't count on, that you may not always be there to take that next breath. So grab this moment and live it with all your heart and with all your enthusiasm.
That's amazing. I mean, I still see a few masks in the audience, but it's incredible to even imagine that a couple of years ago, such a gathering with thousands of people would have like virtually and literally impossible. So it's great to see so many people back here in person to interact with and to learn from and to just like cherish and enjoy life with once again after a brief pause, but an important, significant pause, I think. I mean, if people haven't read Shobha's Lockdown Liaisons yet, you must pick up the book and read it. It is, do you want to just quickly say a bit about Lockdown?
Yes, because the lockdown liaisons I wrote right in the middle of the pandemic. It was as a chronicler of our times, it was important for me to record what I was feeling and going through. But I didn't want to do it in a way that was self-conscious or structured, and I'm feeling this today, so I chose another path to express this and document the pandemic in my own way, which was to write short stories. So I wrote 26 short stories, and 4 of them used to get published every week on as in an e-book format. And when the pandemic ended, of course, then we came out with the physical book. But for me, that was very cathartic. It was my coping mechanism. I think a lot of us were struggling to make some sense of our lives. And I wrote these stories which were deeply felt for me. And they're all written in the first person, so it's very immediate. It can be a man, it can be a woman, it can be a child expressing, not necessarily talking about the pandemic, but talking about the emotional upheaval that had occurred within all of us. And I really do believe that it changed every single individual in some way or the other. And so when Lilette Dubé decided to adapt 4 of those stories and convert them into one-act plays, and they've come to Bengaluru twice, and I think they've been invited back again. I really urge you to see them because they're still relevant, because the emotions are still very relevant. The experiences are still very relevant. It's not just a depressing account of what the world was going through during the pandemic. It was about what the tumultuous emotional challenges that all of us faced, which maybe the pandemic forced us to face. We didn't need to even address them earlier. Life was going along so wonderfully. Why did anyone even want to stop to question anything at all? So that forced stop, that introspection that the pandemic demanded from all of us was really, the outcome was this book. And I completed another novel. It was very important for me that the book was published during the pandemic and not like a looking back book. So it was very immediate, and I'm glad that it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, and Lockdown is not a memoir in that sense. So
Not at all. It's fiction.
So just to bring it back to Insatiable again, Shobhaa, I just wanted to ask you, has there been a moment where you've lost friendships over food, over a food fight or a disagreement, like Madras dosa or Bangalore dosa, which one's better, stuff like that?
Well, not exactly lost friendships, but certainly uh, tested friendships. Because if you're suspicious of one another's food habits or they're totally incompatible, I think it's really a test of marriage too, or any close relationship, any intimate relationship involves a similar attitude to food and a similar palate. It's always very interesting for me to see, including one of my daughters who's married out of our community, our eating habits, our faith even. And I can see how hard she and her husband have to work, especially when we go out. It is mentioned in the book. I think my son-in-law often gets the raw end of the stick because I just don't know the kind of food that will either impress him or he will appreciate or he will like, or worse, that he will shun. So it is a test of human relationships. I do believe it is, food.
And any sort of memorable meal or experience or anecdote you can share with us? It can be from the book, it need not be as well. The more fun and controversial, the better.
Oh gosh, what? That's a tough one. But no, there are lots of anecdotes from the book. I think the one that I'd like to share this afternoon, because it's just coming to me right as we're talking, is I was at the last Jaipur Lit Fest in a new venue, the first time after the pandemic and so on. And looking at what I was serving myself from the breakfast buffet was a gentleman who I was very curious about, and I was also staring at what he was helping himself to. And I knew that we wanted to set up some sort of a conversation, didn't quite know where to begin. So I asked him, do you like appams? And in a very strong accent, which was Bengali French, he said, yes, indeed, he liked appams, but he couldn't see any. And then we talked about, the UP ka puri bhaji and things, but we hadn't formally introduced ourselves. But we carried on a very intense discussion about the breakfast buffet, which was not spectacular or unusual at all. And then finally he said, Abhijit Banerjee, you may have heard of me. So I said, my name's Shobhaa. He said, I'm so glad we finally introduced ourselves to one another because I was feeling very shy, he said. And I said, guess what? So was I. And then a friendship struck up right there and then. And we, of course, you know how Bengalis are about food and fish. So I introduced him to my husband. After that, I was relegated to a nothingness because the entire conversation was about fish, how to buy it, how to cut it, how to eat it, you know, how to worship it also almost. So it's a wonderful friendship that was sparked off just like that. So there have been many such which I feel so delighted about because food is something that we should really rejoice. Each meal is worth rejoicing, no matter how simple it is. It's always wonderful. But to have such a conversation with a Nobel laureate definitely marks a first for me. I hope it's not the last. And it was a pleasure because he writes so wonderfully well on food. He's one of the best writers, food writers. There's a column today in the Times of India as well. There was by Abhijit. He writes a monthly column now on food. He knows it very well. He's extremely informed about food and takes food very seriously, as all Bengali men do. So I think some of the major fights in my home with my husband have been actually over food. Either the food is wrongly presented, or the vegetables are not cut the way they should be, or there's always something that's off. So food definitely is something that plays a very, very big role, I think, in all our lives. We just don't accord it the kind of importance that it does. But the book is not a food book. I have to stress that. And it is my 24th book and not the 17th book. So maybe that can be corrected. And it is a very passionate and an extremely emotional kind of book. Food is merely a peg to tell my stories about this past year.
Right. So, Shobha, I just want to ask you, I mean, 75 years of life, 50 years of writing in this amazing life. What still keeps you insatiable? Where's the drive, the energy, the mojo coming from? What fulfills your heart? What satisfies you? If you could just tell us, how does somebody young like me remain insatiable forever and ever?
Well, earlier you said to me that don't you ever tire? And I was going to ask you, how do you spell that four-letter word? No, it's not an option to tire of life. It should not be an option for any of us. There is so much that life has to offer. Every moment of it can be grabbed and reveled in. So I take my inspiration, honestly speaking. I knew M.F. Hussain Saab extremely well. I knew Kushwant Singh also extremely well. I saw both these gentlemen in their 90s, so productive, so curious, so alive. I see Amitabh Bachchan, 80 plus. I see the professionalism and the drive he brings to every morning. He's at the set whenever he's working, which is most of the time. He's probably one of the first people to arrive on that set. He's got his lines, he's rehearsed, he's got his makeup, he's got his costume. He is ready to shoot like a good professional. I watched M.F. Hussain paint huge canvases, standing on top of a fairly precarious stool with the tall, the paint brushes he often used for the very, the canvases which are larger than life size. And I would watch him really submerged in what he was doing. He was oblivious to everything around him. It was him, the canvas, the subject, the brush, the paints. He'd take short breaks, there'd be music playing. He would keep changing the music, and the rhythm of his painting would change accordingly. So he could go from Vivaldi to Bhimsen Joshi to flamenco, and the work, the canvas would keep coming alive. Similarly with Kushwant, who famously said that they've yet to invent a condom for the pen, and that's really should be the way we look at whatever work we have chosen for ourselves, that there is no full stop. There is no, well, there can be a semicolon, but certainly not a full stop. You have to keep going because you have to keep going. That's the whole energy and joy of life, and to share it with people you love, to give love, to receive love. I mean, that has to be a high complete in itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's like so inspiring and like really, I mean, a lot to learn and take away for all of us youngsters in the audience as well. But there's still maybe times when you're like frustrated, right? Like say the trolls, the hate on social media, the Twitter trolls, the Instagram like comments. I mean, I see some of the stuff that's on your timeline, and it's just like absolutely rude, obnoxious, foolish, etc. So the insatiable nature of your life, you still have to maintain it despite all of this noise going around. So how do you do that?
No, it's not about I still have to maintain it. I choose to. There's a big difference. There's nothing I have to do. So choice is a very powerful and a very important word for me. And I do exactly what I feel is valid and relevant and enjoyable in my context. So trolls are doing what they do best, and I don't engage with anonymous, cowardly people ever. I never have. Standing up to bullies, well, I've done it pretty much all my life, paid a price for it, but it's a price worth paying over and over and over again, because as we all know, every bully you ever meet in your life, whether it's in school, college, later, professionally, every bully in the world is a coward. You stand up to them and they back off. So,
Um, Also, I just wanted to quickly check with you whether food is going to be a recurring theme that you return to or no.
I can't
Maybe,
say.
never say
I
never.
can't say. I mean, like they say, life is a movable feast. And who knows? I mean, you're asking me whether I'll ever be less fascinated or less obsessed with food. That will not happen. And I can tell you a really lovely story, and it's not morbid. For those of you who may think it's morbid, it really isn't, because it says a lot about two wonderful and exceptional ladies who I have known closely, one of whom is undergoing her fourth cycle of chemo as we speak. She writes professionally about food. She travels and loves food. And even as she is going through the chemo, our exchanges are about what I may have eaten, what she plans to eat when she's done with her foods, the chemo cycle, and in between radiation and so on. Food has buoyed up her spirit. It's given her a great deal of courage and joy and hope. She's living to be able to enjoy all of it. She's not giving up on life. And I think food has been a big driver in that. Another wonderful, remarkable lady, when she knew she was terminal, a very close and good friend of mine, when the doctors at the hospital told her, maybe, ma'am, you have maybe a few hours, and that's what it's looking like to us. She summoned her family. She asked for her favorite lipstick, her favorite perfume, a bottle of Belvedere, and lots of caviar. And she said, let's just have a party. This is how I want to go.
On that note, sorry, we don't have any time for any audience questions, but we do have, I think, some time for an audience selfie with the both of us, yes? Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. Stick back around. We just want a quick picture with all of you.